Let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to think about the absolute most helpful person you know. You know exactly who I'm talking about, right? The person who is literally always there to fix a problem, jump in with advice, or just carry the entire weight of a situation when things go completely wrong. From the outside, they look incredibly strong, totally selfless, and like they've just got it all together. But psychology reveals a pretty heartbreaking truth hiding right beneath that capable surface. Behind all that strength is a secret: deep exhaustion. Today we're decoding a really specific psychological pattern that affects so many of these over-functioning people who unconsciously confuse their inherent worth with their function.
So, are you actually loved? Or just useful? Man, that hits hard, doesn't it? The psychological reality is that many of these highly capable people don't actually feel loved for who they are as human beings. Deep down, they feel loved only for what they can fix, what they can provide, or how they can serve others. If you, or maybe someone you know, constantly feels like the love in your life would just completely vanish the exact second you stop helping or giving, this explainer is going to make a whole lot of sense to you. Because saying no feels genuinely dangerous when your entire value feels transactional. We can call this the invisible usefulness trap, which is really all about confusing your inherent worth with your function.
And to really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at conditional love in childhood, because that is exactly where the pattern begins.
You see, people rarely just develop this exhausting survival mechanism out of thin air as adults. It is deeply, deeply ingrained from their earliest environment. And this brings us to a concept psychologists call conditional positive regard. Basically, this means affection wasn't freely given to you. It was something you actively had to earn. Maybe you were the easy child. You sensed the stress or emotional distance in your house, so you adjusted your own behavior to avoid adding any more pressure. You figured out pretty quickly that being helpful, or sometimes just staying completely out of the way, was the absolute only reliable way to get attention or approval.
Because of this dynamic, your young, developing brain adopted a brutal, foundational rule for survival. I am only lovable when I provide value. Now, this wasn't a conscious choice you made, right? It was a highly adaptable, really clever way for a child to ensure they stayed connected to their caregivers. But the catch is, it hardwired your nervous system to believe that simply existing just isn't enough. You literally have to earn your space in every single room you walk into.
And as that child grows into an adult, they carry this profound cognitive distortion with them everywhere they go. Instead of asking the normal human question, "Am I loved?" they instinctively replace it with, "Am I useful?" They measure their relationships not by mutual connection, but by their utility. Because in their mind, usefulness is the exact same thing as safety. This leads us to the guilt of receiving, and the reason why being helped actually feels dangerous to these individuals.
This brings us to the daily, grinding friction of being caught in this trap. Have you ever noticed how incredibly uncomfortable these people get when you try to do something nice for them? Well, this friction comes down to a concept called imbalanced reciprocity. Because they were taught so early on that love is a strict transaction, their brain is literally wired to feel that receiving support creates a debt. When you offer them a compliment or do them a favor, they don't feel joy. They feel an overwhelming sense of guilt and an immediate, anxious pressure to pay you back so the ledger is balanced again.
Let's look at how this actually manifests in everyday behavior. You'll see the clear signs of an emotional caretaker. They are constantly anticipating what everyone else needs, avoiding conflict at all costs because conflict risks disconnection, chronically overgiving, and they're always carrying the heavy weight of other people's emotions. Psychology tells us this is actually an anxious attachment pattern. To the outside world, it looks like endless selflessness, but internally, it's a desperate attempt to maintain connection and secure their place in the relationship.
I want you to just take a second and let this statement breathe. Free love feels completely unfamiliar to you. If your entire life has been built on the premise that affection is a transaction, the concept of someone caring for you simply because you exist is totally alien. It's a beautiful thought, sure, but to a brain wired for survival, it's also absolutely terrifying because it just doesn't follow the rules you know.
Now we have to talk about the fear of replacement, which is honestly the darkest psychological fear in this whole dynamic.
There is a massive misconception here that we really need to clear up. If you jump in to help a friend and the designated helper of the group gets visibly tense or upset, it's so easy to assume they're just being jealous, territorial, or controlling. But that's not it at all. It's not a character flaw. It is pure cognitive survival thinking firing off in their brain. Let me ask you this directly. If you're the fixer in your life and someone else steps in and handles the crisis for once, does it bring you relief or does it bring you panic?
If it brings panic, it's because you are suddenly confronted with a terrifying hidden anxiety. Your subconscious thought is screaming, if they don't need me for this, do they even need me at all?
Let's connect the psychological dots here with what's known as the abandonment link. The brain makes an automatic, instant association between being replaced in a task and being totally abandoned in the relationship. If usefulness is your absolute only safety net and your primary source of belonging, then losing your job as the fixer feels exactly the same to your nervous system as losing love entirely.
So, what is the ultimate result of all this? It's the cost of self-neglect, basically running on completely empty. When you operate like this for years, the reality is incredibly stark. It means showing up constantly tired. It means helping others while you are completely overwhelmed yourself. You end up giving from a cup that isn't just empty, it's bone dry. And underneath it all is a deep-seated belief that your personal needs are inherently secondary to everyone else's. If this sounds like you, I really want to validate that exhaustion right now. These actions, they aren't badges of honor. They are deeply learned patterns of survival.
I want you to let this sink in. You are allowed to rest without losing your worth. The therapeutic reframe here is understanding that your endless utility is just a survival tactic you learned a long time ago. It protected you then when you were vulnerable and just trying to navigate conditional love, but you don't need it now. You inherently deserve connection, safety, and love simply for existing.
And that leaves us with one final, provocative question. It's really the most important question to ask if you want to finally break this cycle. Who are you when you stop fixing everything? If you strip away the favors, the advice, and the constant caretaking, what is actually left? You might just find that the person underneath all that exhausting effort is entirely worthy of love, exactly as they are. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope it gave you something really powerful to think about.